Welcome back. Hope you had a nice break and hope you're ready and excited for the last frame of the day. I know it's been a long day, but hopefully you've had a really lovely time listening to all the presentations and just learning a lot. So here we go. We are now in the last frame, which is developer experience. We've got two presenters here. We're going to be kicked off with the first one, which is Paul Ardeleanu. Paul is a senior developer relations manager at Vonage, and he will be talking to us about what developers want. So as a pretend developer, an ex-developer, I'm super curious what you're going to present here.
You probably all already know this, but I'm going to go in full screen, so you should see everything. Cool.
Perfect. You're all set. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a bit. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my talk. Hope you're all safe and well and enjoying API days so far. As mentioned before, my name is Paul Ardeleanu. I work in the developer relations team at Vonage, where I lead the tooling team. And I would like to spend the next 20 minutes or so kind of sharing with you some of the learnings I've accumulated over the last 3 years while working with developers using our products. And I'll leave you at the end with some practical takeaways. So for those of you that might not have encountered Vonage before, we are a cloud communication company providing messaging, voice, and video APIs that developers can integrate into their apps. You can find more information about us on our developer portal at developer.vonage.com. And you might have heard about us under a previous name, Nexmo, and we've been part of the API Days community for quite a while now. This is a poster from 2018, I believe, API Days. Or recently even from the press due to us getting acquired by Ericsson. So with that out of the way, let's return to the topic at hand. So what do developers want? Given the audience of this event, we'll assume that you are in the API business. That means that APIs are either a product or they enable your product. And with that in mind, on any given day, developers wanting to use your product, probably your APIs, will require quite a wide range of items. So obviously, the APIs are your product. They would need documentation. They would need code snippets, tutorials, libraries, open API specs, familiar standards, SDKs, open source contributions. You see where this is going. Sample apps, debugging tools, integrations, dashboards, free trials, multi-language documentation. Obviously, you want to address a bigger audience, and then SDKs in different programming languages, and that this kind of list kind of grows by the day. In fact, the developer want every single thing. In fact, they want every single thing yesterday. And this is kind of a crux of the issue when businesses are trying to adopt developer relations practices. Usually they start with the developer relations department, and in most cases they fail because they don't kind of follow the best practices that make sense for the context of their business. And we'll get to that in a second. Right. So usually what happens with businesses, they give in and tend to invest in the loudest parts of the demands without putting in place like systematic methods to take into account what actually is the most impactful thing. And the web is full of horrors of developer relations departments actually being disbanded overnight because it didn't make sense in the business context. So you see, when we ask ourselves what developers want, I believe we're asking the wrong question all the time. We should start with the desired outcome of our work and kind of work our way backwards towards the required action. So as a team that is part of a business, we should ask, what do we want as a business? What do businesses want? And why do we want to engage developers and spend all this time and resources trying to get to them or trying to get them to to talk to us in the first place? Broadly speaking, what businesses want kind of fit in a couple of different categories. I split them in 5 different categories here, ordered by how critical they are. The first one is survival. At a minimum, we need to make sure that we can stay in business, right? So in some cases, this does include profitability, but that becomes vital in the development part, together with the growth and attracting talent. This is kind of where the business starts building up. Eventually, with building the right relationships, you get to build a brand. And in the end, we all want a higher purpose on why we get to cast a shadow on this rock in the middle of a vast nothingness sort of thing. It probably all sounds familiar. And it turns out it's actually a pretty known pattern of needs. Everyone is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a slightly simplified version, but all our previous ones actually map very well to this hierarchy, and each builds on top of the previous one. One important element to note, businesses can jump between these stages. And in case of bigger businesses, different departments can be in different stages at different times. Okay, we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this in a bit. Let's now focus attention on what we currently actually use in developer relationships as far as models. So the two most popular ones are ARP and the Orbit model, and they're the two that I've used more or less, over the last 3 years. Let's start with the first one, the ARP strategy framework. It's probably easily recognizable by you once I talk about it. So the ARP is an acronym that stands for awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, product. You see, it's a marketing talk, right? So it has been developed by a former colleague of mine, Phil Legater, and you can see a full introduction at the URL below. It is very similar to the traditional purchase funnel. That's why it sounded familiar to you. And at its core, it's actually a customer-focused marketing light model that relies heavily on the conversion numbers to drive decisions. And this is kind of why a lot of businesses like this kind of model for their DevRel strategy, because it makes sense. They already understand this model. The second one is Orbit. It's an open source model that replaces conversion with connection. It's a very kind of interaction-centric model. And to put it simplistically, it just tracks popularity. If it sounds familiar, it's because it's kind of the social networks, right? So in this model, your audience is split into 4 areas. Called orbits. At the center, you have, kind of around your product, you have ambassadors, then you have fans, then you have users, and then you have observers at the end. And every single tracked interaction kind of gets a score based on the size of the audience of the people involved in that interaction and the love they spread. And it's a rough estimate of a sentiment of each message projects. This model is a bit more kumbaya, if you like, and it tries to associate a value to your social network. Not sure, if it's necessarily the right thing, but that's kind of how they think. Your popularity kind of gives you that score and determines kind of how good an interaction is. So it's safe to say that these two models kind of provide completely different insights into where the developer relations program is at a certain moment in time. But you only get good results if you put in good data, right? So this brings us to the hardest problem in developer relations. And that is obviously metrics. It'll be no surprise that data and trends are absolutely essential in the decision making. However, it is very easy to say, okay, we're doing a great job because last quarter we gave away 10,000 T-shirts with our logo. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, you need to track the correct metrics, and correct is in the right kind, right? So, okay, so then you say, okay, this month we reach 100,000 developers. But, have you really? Did you actually interact with every single attendee at every single event that you spoke or sponsored? Did they actually sign up and pay? And this is kind of where the next adjustments come in. You need metrics that make sense to the business, right? And those metrics for the business depend on the stage the business is at on the hierarchy of needs. Again, going back to where the business is, a startup probably should not spend a lot of time building the brand or having kind of very public mission statement until he nails the basics and has a product that actually makes sense. There are lots of horror stories of people kind of not being able to match their talks with their walk and then kind of leave developers disappointed with their products or customers for that matter. So this are kind of when you track metrics, you need to track the right one. So let's have a look at what metrics we usually track in developer relations. In most cases, these are metrics that are easy to track. Website visits, readership, followers, attendees, T-shirts, and and if you have to please management, number of white papers. I call all of these vanity metrics because they're good to have, but what do they actually tell you much? Do they tell you what's happening inside there? Probably the only thing you should pay attention is the trend. For example, you want your organic traffic to always be ascending, right? You probably want to speak in front of more people at events rather than less. And as long as the trend is in the right direction, it doesn't really matter how those inferring meaning from those numbers is kind of not that important at this stage. Also notice that most of his actions are push actions. So you go and do stuff. You always ask. But what do these numbers actually mean? So let's have a look at the business kind of needs and kind of what the business wants. And broadly speaking, they have different metrics. They have financial metrics like revenue, profit, ROI. They have internal and external facing metrics, anything from culture to monthly active users. And you see a lot of those kind of go straight into kind of the bottom line, like, the fact that you need to make a profit as a business. And they have also, esteem related as you go up on that hierarchy of needs, things like branding and, social good and participating in creating policies and so on. So here's a crazy idea. How about if we use the same metrics or very similar metrics to actually measure DevRel initiatives? So we'll use business metrics to measure DevRel initiatives. So in the process, we can come up with kind of business-driven developer initiatives that are easier to track and actually make things easier for us to kind of do our job. So let's start with the same hierarchy of needs. At a minimum, you need good APIs and docs, right? So if the API is your product, that kind of is a given, right? But you need docs. And the metric for this kind of survival is coverage. And, this kind of is how much of your product is covered by the API. That's your business model. How much of your APIs are covered with docs. I also include in this things like open API specs, snippets, tutorials, literally any single piece of documentation related information that is good for developers to have. On top of that, you need good SDKs, libraries, sample apps, or any sort of tools that make developer lives easier. Anything from having, say, a Node SDK to having a library that supports the latest and shiniest thing in, say, Swift. The metric for this is usage. And this should inform your decisions on how much ongoing resources you should be allocating to keep things up to date for all of these. You will have lots of demands for different things at different stages. You should use data to drive which ones you update more than others, and kind of, you always struggle for resources. So you should use usage as data to make informed decisions with what stuff to take forward. And from here onwards, it's kind of you're ready for public kind of facing initiatives, creating partnership and meaningful interactions. And as you build your brand, you contribute back to community, say by open source. And ambassador programs are also great kind of initiative at this stage. And don't worry too much about, how to track all of these, how to track brand recognition. Your marketing department already knows how to do that. And obviously the mission is a very personal thing, so you can't really define it. But always, if you look at this from bottom up, you'll see that there are different stages. And probably as a business, you shouldn't jump to the top one if you don't cover the basics right. So having an ambassador program when you don't have you don't have all the basics done probably is not a good thing. Okay, so here are the key points that I want you to take from this talk. Measure everything. Each decision must be backed by data, period. No touchy-feely, choices. Make sure that you prioritize the right things. For example, you have both SDKs installs and API call metrics. Install numbers can be skewed massively by various systems, continuous integration systems or whatever. But the actual APIs, the actual API calls have a direct correlation to the bottom line, right? So people pay for accessing your APIs. Accessing your APIs should be the ones to track. This is the usage that you should pay attention to. Prefer pull to push. A subscriber to your newsletter, for example, is probably more valuable than a visitor to your website. A subscriber wants to consume your content. That's why they're subscribed. But also be careful of how you define subscribers, right? So be careful how those people ended up in that list. And, if you buy lists, that's not, that again is not the right kind of subscribers. If someone really wants to consume your content, that's a very, very valuable kind of interaction to have. Moreover, you need to familiarize yourself with the business lingo and actually get to know your marketing and sales colleagues. You need to find ways to help them, and once you have a good relationship with them, you're off to the races. developer relations is kind of a key of foreign department for a business. You get to speak to your customers, and you bring that feedback back to your engineers. And you scan badges at events, you pass that list to the salespeople. A co-founder asks for your guidance at the event, for example. Make sure that you also schedule a call with your startup team and get that connection going. And you see where all this thing happens is you need to have a good connection to all the different parts of a business. And ultimately, experiment, learn, rinse, repeat. No surprise here. You should experiment all the time. You should find what works best. And again, it's driven by data, so you should be able to infer meanings, but also find different ways to test things. And developer relations is kind of both an internal and external exercise. It is a department that probably needs to work well with all the others inside the business. And a lot of people miss kind of the internal part. And in a lot of cases, and this is another reason why a lot of developer relations department fail, is they don't do a good job actually at talking about themselves internally and showing the value that they bring to the business internally. And a lot of people don't even know they exist sometimes in business. And as much as a good kind of job they do outside, in most cases, those initiatives are long term, akin to the brand. If they don't do a good job at preaching themselves internally, people won't see the value that they bring to the business. And that's kind of it. This are the learnings, and it's fair to say that my my perspective on DevRel changed quite substantially over the last 3 years, and from a very very kumbaya affair to a more kind of methodical enterprise. And things always evolves, and it's kind of normal for this to happen. So I'm going to leave you with one single thing, a tweet that actually encompasses everything that we do in developer relations. It's a fun and rewarding activity. The best thing about it is being customer zero. The worst thing about it is being customer zero. You get to play with things, you get to try new things, but also you can get to kind of discover bugs, discover kind of different issues, and work with your colleagues towards correcting them. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this useful. I think I spoke a bit too fast, so I'm a bit ahead of time. If you'd like to try some of our products, we have a voucher code for you. You can use it at developer.vonage.com. Also, if you'd like to come and join me and the rest of the tooling team and build our next generation of tools, we have a few roles open. Any questions, that's my email address, and also that's my Twitter URL. So I'll be sharing the slides shortly in a tweet as well. So follow me on Twitter if you want to get the slides, I guess. That's my hook.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And for those that are paying attention in the chat, Clarice has just talked about running a raffle. So I think one of the best things about being in events is you get to go get all sorts of swag. And obviously, an online event, it's a bit harder to do that. You can't send out, to your point, you can't do a T-shirt giveaways.
And funny enough, actually, we were starting doing in-person events about 2 or 3 months ago, and it's so much better to talk to people in person. It's so much easier to connect and solve people's issues when you talk face-to-face, and you can open a computer and just kind of start doing things. It's talking to people is underrated, and I'm saying this as the most introvert person you'll ever meet.
100%. I think it's turned a lot of introverts into a bit of a craving for human contact.
And also going to the office and seeing your colleagues is kind of a very novel idea this day and age, but it's pretty good.
For sure. So Paul, I did have a question for you. So other than the snarky one about, I thought it was all about socks, not T-shirts anymore, but you can ignore that one.
Well, they do scarves these days, and they do a lot of stuff. So
that's true.
The socks are not necessarily the best thing, but I prefer T-shirts to socks. But sorry.
Nice. Well, so I loved, the insertion of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think if I was playing a bit of I wanted to see that, and so forth, it would be on the list. So fabulous. Thank you for that. You talked a bit about I guess, kind of looking at it from a developer relations person's angle to say, how do you use metrics to also convince the company that this is all goodness?
Mhm.
Does that, in your opinion, does that only work in a consumer product oriented company, or for example, there's plenty of people here from banks, and we had a keynote speaker from the government and so forth. How do developers or even DevRel type folks, even if they don't have that official title,
Sure.
how does it map to those types of organizations?
I think it's like everything in business. You need to find the value in it, and you kind of show people what the value is. For example, if I need someone, like recently, we had an initiative in our team where we wanted to kind of start integrating with other kind of development environments, and for that I needed two more people in my team, so I had to make a business case. I need to justify why I need it. It's the same thing when you go to government or when you go to kind of consumer business. You need to kind of show what you kind of can achieve, and in most cases it can be a long-term goal, and that's kind of probably the hardest to justify, because that requires the business to have a bit of faith in you. um, a lot of businesses play the short-term kind of game, and they want only, especially when they're stock traded, they're only looking at the next quarter, the next earnings. In most cases, developer relations and kind of all the initiatives that are good for the business are both short-term and long-term. DevRel is kind of more towards the long-term, because it goes together with the branding and all the other stuff. I would say find the value in it and start simple. Find something that is underserved as in your business, or find a pain point that you see with your colleagues or with your customers. Go with that and try and put a value towards it. And that value can, again, you get it from metrics, you get it from usage, you get it from a lot of places. And for example, I have my own metrics as we have our own metrics as a team, right? That those metrics are informed by numbers. It's not just we want to make developer twice as happy. That's just kind of it's pointless. But saying I want developers to use us more by X times, that's a different value entirely. And always at the end of the day, unless you work for a charity, and I would argue that even in those cases you should have business cases, because you still you manage someone else's money. It's not necessarily profit, but you still have to have a business case. I would just create a reasoning why it needs to happen. It's a bit like with reasoning for any other parts of a business, and you can have a lot of you can put karma in there, you can put goodwill from the community, you can put a lot of things. And in a lot of cases, you won't be able to assign value towards that, but you need to, at the end of the day, you need to justify your existence inside the business, and that requires, unfortunately, it's a numbers game.
Yeah, it's I think a lesson most people learn over time. Hopefully people are heeding your message. Any comment on, and this will be my last question, but any comment
Sure.
for the folks in this frame who are more engineers or engineering leaders, and engineers by dint of kind of the personalities of what makes them great at their job. They are introverts. They're not necessarily the folks that are out there going, how can I talk to people and tell them why this is so important? Any simple tips that you could share with them as someone who's kind of been through that journey?
Yeah, I would say make the most of relationships with your colleagues. And if you feel like you don't, as an introvert person, sometimes it's hard to relate to other humans. And in those cases, just go after the resources they create. For example, there is no reason why you shouldn't, for example, look at the presentations they're doing, right? Look at their numbers, look at what they see from customers. I'm pretty sure there are, internal public forums for businesses where they discuss issues they have with customers. And those should probably inform some of the decisions you're making, especially as you go higher up and you are more responsible for kind of direction of a business. A lot of those should be able to kind of inform the decisions that you are taking. I would say use your colleagues more and kind of rely on them more for stuff that you don't understand, and also play on your strengths. If engineering is your strength, play on that and find ways to help yourself around other areas where you don't have, a lot of strengths. Can you still hear me, Akhil? I think you have issues with your headphones. Okay. I can still hear you.
I seem to have lost my
Can you hear us now?
Speakers. Am I back?
Hello? Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, hey, look, thank you so much. I can't actually hear you, but
It's okay. Thank you.
What you just told everyone was amazing and incredible. Thank you so very much, Paul, and thank you also for spending your morning from the UK with us.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.